Saint Agnes appears in the history of the Church as one of the purest, strongest, and most admirably steadfast young women in faith that Christianity has ever known. Living in an era when professing the name of Christ meant walking side by side with the real possibility of martyrdom. Still very young, she grew up in a Rome steeped in splendor and decadence, where the luxury of noble families contrasted with the cruelty of persecutions against the followers of Jesus. From early on, Agnes showed a heart turned entirely toward God. She refused to follow the standards of Roman society that sought to define a woman's worth by beauty, by the possessions she owned, or by the family alliances she could provide. For her, her identity was founded exclusively in Christ. Each day, her life became a silent offering, a luminous testimony that true greatness is not found in earthly power, but in fidelity to the Lord who calls every soul to holiness. From childhood, Agnes revealed a profound spiritual sensitivity that impressed even the adults who lived around her. Her prayer was constant, sincere, and marked by a personal love for Christ that transcended ordinary understanding. She spoke of Jesus as one speaks of someone present, living, near, and this conviction illuminated the whole of her view of the world. Her parents, who belonged to the Roman nobility, gave her a refined education. Yet even surrounded by privileges, Agnes never allowed herself to be seduced by pleasure, ostentation, or the banquets that animated high society. On the contrary, she cultivated great sobriety, rejecting everything that might draw her heart away from the simplicity of the gospel. Early on, she decided that she would consecrate herself totally to Christ, promising perpetual virginity, not out of contempt for marriage, but out of absolute love for the one who, for her, was the perfect bridegroom. The decision to consecrate herself entirely to Christ was made by Agnes freely and consciously, even though she was still a child. In that time, consecrated virginity was seen as a challenge to the Roman system, because it opposed the social destiny expected of noble young women, which was marriage to strengthen political alliances. But Agnes saw in celibacy a sublime path of self-giving, in which her soul could belong exclusively to the Lord. Her purity was a gift and a testimony that radiated peace and strength to those who knew her. Many claimed that upon looking at her, they felt deeply touched, as if that young girl carried within herself a light that was not of this world. For Agnes, chastity was not merely a moral virtue, but a state of profound union with Christ, and she guarded it with unshakable zeal, even when that commitment began to attract the unwanted attention of powerful suitors. The fame of Agnes's beauty spread quickly among the young nobles of Rome, and many sought her hand in marriage, believing she would be an ideal wife, capable of elevating the prestige of any family with which she allied herself. Yet, to everyone's surprise, she rejected every proposal with serenity and firmness, saying that she had consecrated her life to a bridegroom far more noble and powerful than any mortal man. This response, though filled with deep spiritual truth, provoked perplexity and irritation in those who did not understand the meaning of the vow of virginity. Many believed it was pride, when in fact it was a manifestation of total love for Christ. Agnes, however, never belittled anyone or treated with contempt those who approached her. She always spoke with humility and gentleness, explaining that her heart was pledged to the Lord, and no promise of wealth, influence, or earthly glory could divert her from her choice. Among the many suitors rejected by Agnes, one of them would be responsible for unleashing her passion and martyrdom. He was the son of the prefect of Rome, an ambitious young man accustomed to seeing all his desires satisfied, for whom a simple no was inconceivable. When he was rejected by Agnes, he felt his honor wounded and his vanity deeply struck. Unable to accept that a young girl could prefer Christ to his prestige, he interpreted the refusal as a personal affront. His pride turned into rage, and that rage would soon become persecution. From that moment on, Agnes ceased to be merely a pious young Christian and became a threat to the pride of powerful men. And for that reason, she placed herself in the sights of Roman authorities, who were already inclined to repress with brutality any manifestation of the Christian faith. Agnes's serene and firm posture in the face of social pressures revealed the spiritual maturity she possessed from a very early age. While other young women concerned themselves with dresses, festivals, and marital alliances, she devoted her hours to prayer, to caring for the needy, and to the reading of the scriptures, which were being copied and transmitted secretly by Christians. Her heart was large enough to love everyone, but it belonged exclusively to Christ, and that exclusivity was a living testimony in a world that sought to divide the human heart among worldly interests and superficial devotions. Agnes, with her purity, showed that love for God is capable of freeing the soul from every chain, and that true freedom consists in choosing the good, even when that implies facing persecution and suffering. Agnes's life was marked by an extraordinary sensitivity to the suffering of others. Even though she lived in a wealthy family, she was not seduced by privilege or by the protection her social condition offered her. She used to visit the poor, bringing food, clothing, and words of hope. Many said she had the gift of seeing Christ in the faces of those who suffered, and this silent charity drew her soul even closer to the Redeemer. For Agnes, faith was not merely a set of beliefs, but a concrete way of living marked by deeds, sacrifice, and love. Every act of kindness she performed rekindled the flame of faith among Christians who lived in hiding, fearful of persecutions. Her presence was a refuge of peace, a ray of light amid the shadows of pagan Rome. However, the more Agnes's holiness grew, the more the hatred of those dominated by pride and envy also grew. The prefect's son could not accept that a young Christian girl had rejected him, and, supported by his family's power, he began to spread slanders about her, accusing her of blaspheming the Roman gods and violating the religious laws of the empire. In that period, such accusations were enough to bring someone to trial and possibly to martyrdom. Agnes knew the risks, yet she never renounced her faith, for she was convinced that her mission was to bear witness to the truth of Christ, even in the face of threats. Instead of fearing suffering, she strengthened herself in trust that God would be with her in all circumstances. The Christians who knew Agnes sensed that something great was about to happen. Many felt in their hearts that that pure and dedicated young girl was called to a special mission, perhaps even to martyrdom. And although they feared for her safety, they admired her courage and her total surrender to the Lord. Agnes, for her part, remained calm, like someone who had already given to Christ not only her youth, but also her future and her very life. Her absolute trust in divine love was so deep that even in the face of rumors of persecution, she continued to walk through the streets of Rome with uncommon serenity, radiating a peace that came directly from her union with God. As the conflict drew near, Agnes intensified her life of prayer. She spent long moments in silence before God, asking for strength to face whatever was to come. She did not beg to be spared, but to remain faithful to the end. Her surrender was so total that many compared her to the wise virgins of the gospel, who keep their lamps always lit while waiting for the bridegroom. For Agnes, Christ was the bridegroom coming to take her, not to earthly glory, but to eternity. Thus each day she lived became a loving preparation for that final encounter, which she would embrace with the confidence of a soul wholly consecrated. The decisive moment in Agnes's life began when she was denounced before the Roman authorities for her fidelity to Christ and for her refusal to marry the prefect's son. The accusation was cloaked in false religious concern, claiming that she disrespected the gods and threatened the order of the empire by following a clandestine faith. Yet everyone knew that the true motive was the personal vengeance of the rejected young man. Rome lived in times of tension, with persecutions that varied in intensity according to the mood of the rulers. When Agnes was brought to trial, her serenity contrasted with the aggressiveness of her accusers. The young girl, fragile in appearance, showed an inner strength so luminous that even some soldiers hesitated to mistreat her. But the state machinery of the empire was not driven by compassion, but by fear and vanity. Agnes's presence there ignited a spiritual fire that Rome tried to extinguish with brutality. In the tribunal, the judge tried to persuade her at first in a gentle way, offering her the possibility of renouncing the faith and thus preserving her life and her social future. He emphasized her youth, her beauty, and her many opportunities if only she would submit to Roman demands. But Agnes listened to everything in respectful silence without wavering for an instant. When she was finally given the word, she declared in a firm voice that she belonged to Christ, that she had consecrated her virginity to the Lord, and that no human power could force her to break that spiritual covenant. Her answer astonished the tribunal, for it was not common for a young girl to speak with such determination before the most feared authorities of the empire. That courage was a direct affront not only to Roman laws, but also to the pride of men who considered themselves masters of others' destinies. Agnes's firm refusal inflamed the anger of the prefect's son and the magistrates present, who began to treat her with severity. They could not understand how an adolescent could ignore the promises of wealth, prestige, and security that were offered to her. To the authorities, religious fidelity was seen as foolish obstinacy, and consecrated virginity as rebellion against the social order. Agnes, however, kept her gaze serene, like one who contemplates a reality invisible to human eyes. Her faith gave her a deeper vision of life, and her courage revealed to the world the power of Christ in human weakness. Every response she gave enraged the judges even more, because it showed that no instrument of imperial coercion had power over her soul. Rome could wound her body, but it would never dominate her heart. When they realized that persuasion would have no effect, the magistrates decided to humiliate her publicly, believing that shame would break her resistance. They ordered that she be taken to a place of prostitution, where her virginity would be violently attacked and her faith ridiculed before all. It was an inhuman, cruel, and profoundly offensive punishment, especially for a Christian who had consecrated her purity to God. Yet even before that terrible threat, Agnes showed no fear. She trusted fully that Christ, to whom she had offered her life, would not abandon her at that decisive moment. Her silence was a constant prayer, an intimate dialogue with the divine bridegroom who sustained her with his grace. Those who accompanied her were astonished by her calm, for it was evident that a supernatural strength enveloped her. The path to the house of prostitution became one of the most moving moments of Agnes's passion. Many Christians watched from afar, unable to help her, but deeply touched by her courage. They said a gentle radiance illuminated her face, as if God clothed her with an even more dazzling purity in that instant of extreme danger. When she arrived at the place of condemnation, a miraculous event deeply moved those present. All the men who tried to approach Agnes were stopped by an invisible force, unable to touch her. Christian tradition further recounts that one of the guards, who tried to violate her, was knocked to the ground as if a powerful hand had repelled him. Agnes's purity was protected directly by God, and that miracle would become one of the strongest signs of her holiness. Another prodigy, even more impressive, occurred when the prefect's own son tried to approach her, believing that he, with his status and power, could violate the young girl with impunity. But upon entering the place where Agnes was, surrounded by a mysterious light, he fell to the ground and lost consciousness, as if struck down by the holiness emanating from her. News of this spread quickly among those present, causing confusion and fear. Some thought the Roman gods were angry. Others suspected that a divine power, greater than any pagan divinity, was protecting the young girl. The young man's body remained motionless until Agnes, moved by mercy, offered a brief prayer to Christ, asking that he be restored. and immediately the young man returned to life, rising bewildered before all. The miracle of the resurrection led many there to recognize the power of God and the holiness of Agnes. Yet instead of repenting, the prefect reacted with even greater fury. His honor, already wounded by the young girl's rejection, was now shaken by the fact that his son had been humiliated before the people, even if miraculously restored. The hardness of that man's heart did not allow him to see the grace that had occurred before his eyes. On the contrary, he ordered that Agnes be taken back to the tribunal, this time with greater rigor, for he saw in her not an innocent girl protected by God, but a threat to Roman authority. Agnes's holiness, rather than awakening conversion in her enemies, provoked even more conflict, revealing how human pride can blind even those who witness evident miracles. Back in the tribunal, Agnes was treated with more brutality. The magistrates reddened with rage at the firmness of that young girl, who even threatened, showed no fear. She remained calm, her face illuminated by faith, like someone who had already given her life to Christ and could lose nothing more. When the judges accused her of practicing sorcery because of the miracles that had been witnessed, Agnes replied that none of it came from her, but from the living God who protects his servants. That statement increased even more the indignation of the pagan authorities, who could not bear to hear that a mere Christian adolescent proclaimed the existence of a God greater than all the divinities of Rome. Each word of Agnes was like a spiritual sword that wounded the pride of the powerful. The population of Rome began to divide in the face of what it was witnessing. Some believed Agnes was a blessed young girl protected by heavenly forces, while others, seized by fear of the authorities and prejudice against Christians, argued that she should be punished to prevent her influence from spreading. Agnes's faith became a public witness, and her martyrdom drew near as an inevitable outcome. Even so, she remained unshaken, sustained by absolute trust in Christ's presence in her life. Nothing the authorities said made her heart waver. The young girl understood that suffering, when united to the cross of Jesus, becomes a source of salvation, and for that reason she embraced each moment of persecution as participation in the Lord's passion. At last, the tribunal decided that Agnes should die, for her unbreakable faith represented an affront to imperial authority. Yet even in the final sentence, the judges showed indecision, fearing the reaction of the people and the risk of stirring even more sympathy for Christians. They sought a way to carry out the sentence without turning Agnes into a martyr, but that attempt was useless, for her very life, marked by purity and courage, was already a testimony the Church would never forget. When Agnes heard the condemnation, she neither cried nor begged for mercy. On the contrary, she thanked God for allowing her to be considered worthy to unite herself to the sacrifice of Christ. Her radiant faith in that final instant made it clear that she was not walking toward death, but toward eternal life, where she would meet her divine bridegroom forever. Agnes's execution was ordered swiftly by the Roman authorities, who wished to close the case before new rumors of miracles spread among the people. Yet even in the face of the sentence, the young girl's serenity impressed everyone. The Christians who followed her story knew she was going to martyrdom, as one goes to a loving encounter with Christ. Agnes's faith was so firm that it became strength for the persecuted community, which saw in her an example of absolute fidelity. She did not lament the youth she was leaving behind, because her heart already dwelt in eternity. Martyrdom was not for her a defeat, but the crowning of her total surrender to God. And Rome, which intended to extinguish the light of that young Christian girl, would end up making her witness even more brilliant. The place chosen for Agnes's execution was a public space, so that all would see the punishment reserved for those who defied the empire. Yet rather than provoking fear, her presence there awakened emotion and admiration. They said she walked with her head held high, without signs of despair or fragility. It was as if her steps were guided by a divine strength no human suffering could shake. As the soldiers led her, many spectators, especially women, shed tears at the sight of that girl so young facing death with such dignity. In her posture, there was not only courage, but a deep peace that disarmed even those who supported the persecution of Christians. Upon arriving at the place of execution, Agnes asked for a moment to pray. Tradition relates that, as she lifted her heart to God, a gentle radiance surrounded her face, as if a heavenly light rested upon her in a gesture of welcome. Her small and delicate body seemed clothed in supernatural strength, and her eyes, turned toward heaven, reflected the certainty that that moment was not a tragedy, but the beginning of a definitive union with Christ. For many present, it was impossible not to feel that something sacred was happening. She was not alone. God himself accompanied her and gave her strength to face that decisive moment, and her silent prayer was, in itself, a testimony greater than any speech. The executioner, however, was uneasy, not because he felt pity, but because he sensed that this execution would not be like the others. Before Agnes's purity, there was an inner resistance that disturbed him. He could not understand how someone so young could face death with such tranquility. According to ancient accounts, the executioner himself hesitated before carrying out the order, not out of fear of the authorities, but because he could not grasp why that girl did not plead, did not scream, did not show fear. This contrast between the empire's brutality and the young Christian's serenity made the moment even more striking. Agnes's spiritual strength was so evident that it shook even those accustomed to violence. Even so, the martyrdom had to run its course. Before being killed, Agnes publicly proclaimed her faith in Christ, affirming that he was her only Lord and bridegroom, the one to whom she had consecrated her youth and her life. She declared that she did not fear death, because she knew Christ awaited her with the crown of eternal glory. Her words, spoken with gentleness and firmness, echoed powerfully in the hearts of the Christians present, who would forever preserve that memory. For many, it was the decisive testimony that strengthened their own faith. Even those who did not believe in Christ felt an inner trembling upon hearing those words, which seemed to carry an authority that did not come from earth, but directly from heaven. The execution happened quickly, yet was profoundly moving. The executioner, still reluctant, carried out his duty while Agnes kept her gaze fixed on God, not allowing fear to take her heart. Tradition recounts that, at the moment of her death, an indescribable peace fell over the place, as if heaven had opened to receive the pure soul of that young martyr. Many testified that a gentle fragrance spread through the air, a characteristic sign of holiness in Christian tradition. Agnes's death was not marked by screams or turmoil, but by a reverent silence that contrasted with the cruelty of the execution. It was as if all creation recognized the greatness of that moment. As soon as Agnes gave her soul to God, several Christians approached discreetly to gather her body, eager to honor the young girl who had become a symbol of purity and courage. Even at the risk of punishment, they wrapped her body with care, as one touches something sacred. Many wept, not only for the human loss, but for the certainty that God had received that martyr with infinite love. The soldiers tried to disperse the crowd, but the emotion was so great that they could not prevent some Christians from collecting locks of hair, fragments of her garments, and even the spilled blood, which soon would become relics venerated throughout the early church. After her martyrdom, Agnes became a source of inspiration for countless Christians who lived in hiding, fearful of persecutions. Her youth and purity offered living proof that the Christian faith can transform even the weakest into true spiritual heroes. In catacombs, secret houses, and clandestine meetings, her name was spoken with reverence and gratitude. She had shown that fidelity to Christ was worth more than any earthly good, more than life itself. Many young Christian women began to look to Agnes as a model, wishing to imitate her purity and her courage. and men and women strengthened their faith by remembering that a 13-year-old girl had overcome the dreaded Roman Empire with the power of God's love. As days passed, rumors of miracles began to arise. Many claimed to have received special graces by praying at Agnes's tomb. The sick were healed, the afflicted found consolation, and persecuted Christians recovered lost courage. The place where her body had been buried quickly became a point of pilgrimage, even under the risk of reprisals from Roman authorities. It was evident that God wished to glorify his martyr, showing the world that death had not been the end, but the beginning of an even greater mission. Agnes, who in life radiated purity and fortitude, continued to do so after her departure to heaven. Her martyrdom thus became an inexhaustible source of grace. In time, Agnes's witness was not confined to Rome. News of her holiness spread throughout the empire, reaching Christian communities in Africa, Asia, and Europe. Her name began to be mentioned in the liturgies, and her memory celebrated as that of a wise and courageous virgin who remained faithful to Christ to the end. Her figure became a symbol of the spiritual strength of Christian women who, even in societies dominated by men, displayed a greatness that came from above. The life and martyrdom of Agnes crossed centuries, remaining alive in the heart of the Church as a testimony that God chooses the humble and the small to confound the proud and the powerful. Rome had tried to silence a girl, but God transformed her into an eternal echo of holiness. With the martyrdom accomplished, Agnes's memory immediately became a living flame in the Christian community. Despite the fear that dominated the faithful during persecutions, her witness offered a new courage, almost supernatural. Many Christians spoke of her as of a heavenly friend, someone who knew deeply the pains of persecution and who now interceded for them with Christ. Agnes's figure began to take shape not only as a martyr, but as a model of purity and spiritual strength. Her youth made her sacrifice even more moving and admired. For the nascent church, she had become more than a sister in faith. She was a luminous sign that love for Christ is stronger than any earthly power, and that even an adolescent, when moved by divine grace, can silently bring down the structures of an empire. Agnes's tomb, located in the catacombs near the Via Nomentana, began to attract visitors constantly, even under the risk of reprisals. The faithful gathered to pray in silence, placing flowers, small lamps, and notes written in secret. Many reported feeling a deep peace in that place, as if the soil there were permeated with a heavenly presence. Before long, stories of healings and graces began to multiply. Accounts spoke of the sick who rose strengthened, of the afflicted who found consolation, and of entire families who returned to the faith by remembering the example of the young martyr. Agnes's name spread from mouth to mouth, strengthening a growing devotion that not even Roman violence could erase. It was evident that God wished to glorify the one who had loved him above all things. Among the stories associated with Agnes's tomb, one of the best known was the spiritual transformation of many young people who, touched by her purity and courage, desired to imitate her love for Christ. Many claimed that when praying before her burial place, they felt an inner call to abandon a superficial life and seek an existence more faithful to the gospel. An entire generation found in Agnes a living example that holiness is not the privilege of the elderly, but a gift accessible to those who, even in youth, desire to give themselves completely to the Lord. The presence of that girl martyr became strength for many who lived divided between the world and God. Her testimony summoned them to choose the good with firmness, without fear of consequences. Agnes's devotion grew so much that even after the end of some persecutions, her tomb continued to be one of the most visited in Rome. The fame of her holiness reached noble families and influential people who began to desire to build a church in her honor. During the pontificate of Pope Liberius, centuries later, veneration of the saint was already so widely disseminated that it became evident that a worthy space needed to be erected to safeguard her relics. However, tradition records that the most decisive impetus for the construction of the first basilica dedicated to Agnes came from an unexpected source, a young woman named Constance, daughter of Emperor Constantine. This connection would profoundly mark the cult of the saint and further expand her fame among Christians and non-Christians. Constance suffered from a serious illness that no physician could cure. In desperation, she heard reports about miracles obtained through Agnes's intercession and decided to visit her tomb in secret. Even though she was the daughter of the most powerful man in the empire, Constance walked to the catacombs with humility, recognizing that only God could restore her health. Upon touching the place where Agnes had been buried, she offered a sincere prayer, begging for help. According to tradition, in that very moment, she was miraculously healed. The event spread quickly, reaching even the emperor himself, who was deeply impressed by the intercession of that young martyr. This miracle would change the history of devotion to the saint, for it touched directly the heart of an imperial family. Grateful for the miracle, Constance ordered the construction of a magnificent basilica over the catacombs where Agnes had been buried. It was her way of honoring the martyr who had restored her health and at the same time acknowledging the greatness of the Christian God who was already transforming the empire in a silent way. The construction of the basilica marked a decisive moment in the history of the Church, for it showed that the faith once persecuted was now protected by those who had once fought it. Thus, Agnes's memory began to be celebrated not only by simple Christians, but also by the converted Roman elite. The basilica became a symbol of the victory of faith over hatred and of purity over pagan corruption. Agnes's life, so brief and so intense, continued to bear fruit in the heart of the empire. The basilica built over Agnes's tomb was not merely a building. It was a testimony to Rome's spiritual transformation. Its architecture, rich in detail, sought to reflect the purity and nobility of the young martyr. Frescoes depicted scenes from her life, including the moment she rejected the advances of the prefect's son, the miracle that occurred in the house of prostitution, and her courageous martyrdom. Each image invited the faithful to contemplate her holiness and to ask her intercession. The basilica became a meeting point for pilgrims from across the empire who arrived bringing their intentions, sorrows, and hopes. There, before the saint's relics, many experienced deep spiritual consolations, feeling that Agnes interceded for them with the love of a sister and with the confidence of one who stands face to face with God. As time passed, Agnes's figure became increasingly associated with purity and consecrated virginity. For many young Christian women, she became a model of total love for Christ and courage in the face of society's pressures. Her decision to consecrate herself entirely to the Lord, even at so young an age, influenced generations of women who, inspired by her example, chose to dedicate their lives to prayer, charity, and the service of the Church. Agnes became the patroness of Christian virgins, a symbol of spiritual beauty that surpasses all earthly beauty. Her name began to be invoked in ceremonies of consecration, and many young women asked her intercession in order to remain faithful to the vocation they had embraced with love. Beyond being venerated as a model of purity, Agnes also became a symbol of courage for all Christians. Her unshakable fidelity in the face of persecution proved that the strength that comes from God is greater than any human threat. In an age when many wavered out of fear of Roman punishments, Agnes's witness showed that divine grace is able to sustain even the most fragile. Men and women found in her inspiration to remain firm in the faith, even when it meant putting their own lives at risk. Agnes was remembered as the one who preferred to die rather than deny Christ, and that heroic choice echoed in the hearts of all who sought to live the gospel with authenticity. Little by little, the cult of Agnes crossed the boundaries of Rome and spread throughout the Christian world. Churches and chapels were dedicated to her among various peoples, and her story was told as an example of love and fidelity that transcends time. Poets and Christian writers composed hymns in her honor, and preachers invoked her witness to strengthen the faith of communities. The Church's liturgy incorporated her memory in a solemn way, celebrating her martyrdom as a spiritual treasure for all the faithful. Agnes had become eternal, not only because of her heroic death, but because of the grace God poured out through her life and intercession. Her story continued alive, continually inspiring those who sought holiness amid the trials of the world. As the centuries advanced, St. Agnes came to hold a special place, not only in popular devotion, but also in the Church's theological reflection. Her martyrdom became a symbol of the victory of grace over brute force, and her youth revealed to the world that God chooses the little ones to confound the powerful. Theologians and fathers of the Church, such as St. Ambrose and St. Jerome, wrote about her with deep admiration, highlighting her purity, firmness, and total love for Christ. For them, Agnes represented the ideal of Christian virginity, lived not as a rejection of the world, but as total self-giving to the divine bridegroom. Their words emphasized that even though she was only a girl, she possessed a spiritual wisdom that surpassed that of adults, showing that holiness does not depend on age, but on the heart's disposition before God. St. Ambrose, in particular, became one of the greatest promoters of the life of St. Agnes, mentioning her in his homilies as a perfect example of purity and courage. He described her death as a spiritual marriage in which the young girl united herself definitively to Christ. For the holy Bishop of Milan, Agnes was more than a martyr. She was a consecrated virgin who sealed with her own blood the fidelity to the choice she had made in childhood. His words passed through generations and helped to consolidate Agnes as a model of holiness for the entire body of the Church. This theological witness also contributed to her memory being celebrated with even greater fervor and respect, making her cult universal and deeply rooted in Catholic tradition. At the same time, devotion to St. Agnes began to inspire the Church's liturgical life. Her feast, celebrated on January 21st, became one of the most beloved of the Christian calendar, especially among communities that cultivated consecrated life. In ancient liturgies, beautiful texts were recited in her honor, extolling her purity and her courage in the face of martyrdom. Gregorian chant also paid homage to the saint, with melodies that evoked the peace and fortitude of her soul. Agnes's name began to be invoked in various prayers and fell into the heart of the Catholic people as a synonym of luminous holiness. Many young women received her name at baptism, desiring that their patroness would accompany them throughout life and lead them on the path of fidelity to God. The iconography dedicated to St. Agnes also gained great prominence throughout history. Christian artists represented her always as a beautiful and pure young girl, generally dressed in white, a symbol of virginity. In her hands, a lamb frequently appeared, a reference to her name in Latin, Agnes, and to the title, innocent, as a spotless lamb. This image became inseparable from her figure because it expressed both her purity and her total self-giving to the Lamb of God. In many paintings, Agnes appears holding a palm, the symbol of martyrdom, and a crown representing eternal victory. Each work of art was, at the same time, an act of praise and a catechesis, helping the faithful contemplate her life and lift their thoughts to heavenly realities. Beyond visual representations, her story began to inspire songs, poems, and prayers composed over the centuries. Christian poets described her physical beauty as a reflection of the spiritual beauty that dwelled in her soul. Others highlighted the fortitude of her faith, capable of disarming even the severity of judges and the brutality of Roman soldiers. These texts circulated among the faithful and strengthened devotion to the saint, who became little by little a universal example of the perfect union between purity and courage. In many Christian communities, especially among young women, she was venerated as a protector of chastity and of the consecrated vocation, being invoked in moments of spiritual discernment and personal challenges. St. Agnes's presence in the daily life of Christians also became especially significant. Many mothers asked her intercession to protect their daughters against dangers and harmful influences. Young people turned to her to find strength in the face of temptations and social pressures. Entire families placed their concerns under her protection, confident that she, who remained faithful to Christ amid persecutions, could intercede for them in difficult situations. This family devotion became one of the most beautiful expressions of the Christian people's love for their saint. Agnes became a friend, counselor, and constant spiritual presence in the lives of thousands of Christian homes, which found in her a model of integrity and love for God. With the flourishing of female religious orders, St. Agnes gained even more relevance. Many congregations chose her as patroness or a spiritual inspiration for their rules of life. Contemplative nuns saw in Agnes the perfect example of union with Christ, while religious dedicated to apostolic work found in her the courage needed to face the challenges of mission. Her figure passed through cloisters and communities, illuminating vocations and strengthening vows. In many convents, special devotional practices were created in her honor, especially on the day of her feast. Prayer, songs, and processions were part of the celebrations that recalled her martyrdom and renewed the desire to follow her example of total love for the Lord. Devotion to St. Agnes also reached kings, queens, and rulers throughout history. Many Christian monarchs sought her intercession in times of war, plague, or political crisis. They recognized in her not only a powerful saint, but a symbol of divine protection over those who remain faithful to God's will. Some stories recount that sovereigns made important decisions after praying before her relics or asking for her help. This shows how Agnes's holiness transcended social boundaries and reached from the humblest to the most influential, demonstrating that before God we are all equal and called to seek truth and justice. Over the centuries, countless miracles were attributed to the intercession of St. Agnes. Physical healings, unexpected conversions, spiritual deliverances, and extraordinary graces strengthened popular devotion even more. Many accounts speak of the sick who recovered health after touching her relics or praying before her image. Others tell of situations of extreme danger in which people were protected in inexplicable ways after invoking her name. Each of these miracles was seen as a sign of God's love, who continues to act through his saints. Agnes, who in life radiated purity and courage, continued through the centuries to offer the world testimonies of mercy and divine protection. St. Agnes thus became one of the most beloved and venerated figures of Christian tradition, not only because of her martyrdom, but because of the spiritual strength her story conveys. Her short life, marked by purity, courage, and unbreakable fidelity, remains a Postoyan invitation for all Christians to embrace with love the vocation God has entrusted to them. In her story shines the truth that no sacrifice is too great when offered to Christ. And in the memory of the Church, Agnes remains alive, inspiring millions of faithful to walk with firmness, hope, and love in following Jesus. Her light did not go out on the day of her death. On the contrary, it became even more intense, illuminating all of church history with the beauty of a life totally given to God. With the development of Christianity in the Western world, St. Agnes continued to occupy a special place in spiritual reflections on the feminine vocation and the value of Christian purity. The Church came to see in her not only a martyr of the past, but an icon of holiness that remains relevant in every age. Her story was read in Christian communities as an example of how love for Christ can transform a simple young girl into a model of incomparable strength. In times of moral decadence or persecutions, her witness was remembered to strengthen the faithful, especially those who face pressure to renounce their faith or compromise their values. St. Agnes showed, through her own life, that fidelity to the gospel requires deep conviction and supernatural courage, capable of facing even the power of an empire. Medieval Christian spirituality found in Agnes an inexhaustible source of inspiration. Theologians and mystics meditated on the intimate bond between virginity and spousal love for Christ, a central theme in the saint's life. For them, Agnes did not renounce marriage out of contempt for matrimony, but because she had profoundly understood God's call to total self-giving. This self-giving made her a mirror of divine purity, a testimony of a soul fully united to its Creator. In many monasteries, Agnes's story was read to novices who found in her life a perfect expression of the spiritual beauty they desired to cultivate. Her fidelity was seen as the fruit of grace, but also as the conscious response of a young girl who chose in full freedom to love the one who first loved her. Beyond the monastic environment, popular devotion also kept St. Agnes's memory alive. In the towns and villages of medieval Europe, traditions arose that sought to express the people's tenderness and respect for the young martyr. In some places, processions were held with little girls dressed in white, symbolizing the purity and trust that marked the saint's life. In others, wool was blessed on the day of her feast, a tradition that remains to this day, symbolizing the lamb associated with her name and iconography. These simple gestures, handed down through generations, helped keep alive the spiritual bond between the Christian people and the saint who had won the hearts of so many with the light of her total self-giving to God. The story of St. Agnes also exerted significant influence on Christian art in the medieval and Renaissance periods. Painters, sculptors, and architects sought to portray her purity and courage through images that stirred devotion in the viewer. In many Renaissance works, she appears bathed in a gentle light, holding a lamb and a palm, symbols of her innocence and martyrdom. Some representations show her before the Roman judge, radiating serenity while the aggressor tries to coerce her. Others depict the miracle of divine protection in the house of prostitution or her walk to the place of martyrdom. These images did not serve only an aesthetic function, but a catechetical one. They taught the faithful to contemplate the beauty of holiness and to aspire to a life more united to God. As the centuries passed, St. Agnes became one of the saints most deeply associated with Christian youth. Her story was often presented as a witness that holiness does not require advanced age or long years of spiritual experience. Children, adolescents, and young people found in her an attainable example, proof that God acts powerfully in the life of those who generously open themselves to His grace. In spiritual retreats, youth gatherings, and moments of catechesis, educators used her life as inspiration to invite teenagers to live with purity, firmness, and love for Christ. Agnes appeared as a symbol of the greatness that can be born from simplicity, the courage that springs from faith, and the beauty that shines from a heart wholly dedicated to the Lord. Moreover, St. Agnes's figure came to be related to the defense of human dignity, especially that of women. In a world that often reduced feminine worth to social conventions, physical appearance, or imposed roles, Agnes showed that a woman's dignity is profoundly spiritual and is born of her relationship with God. Her determination before powerful Romans demonstrated that no earthly authority can violate the inner freedom of a soul united to Christ. Throughout history, many women who were persecuted, violated, or discriminated against found in St. Agnes comfort and a model. Her witness echoed as a proclamation of the truth that every woman is called to holiness and possesses infinite value in God's eyes, regardless of external circumstances. Saint Agnes also became an important figure in historical moments of moral crisis. When society seemed to lose its sense of chastity, fidelity, and respect for human dignity, her story resonated as a living reminder of the importance of these virtues. Preachers and spiritual leaders frequently turned to her example to invite the faithful to recover the sacred meaning of the body, sexuality, and purity. Agnes showed that virtue is not weakness, but strength, that chastity is not limitation, but freedom, and that fidelity to Christ is the path to a joy the world cannot offer. Her voice, echoing through the centuries, invited men and women to seek a life more coherent with the gospel. In many countries, popular traditions linked to St. Agnes's feast remain alive to this day. In Italy, for example, children take part in wool blessings, recalling the lamb associated with the saint. In some regions of Spain and Latin America, young people make special promises of purity on her liturgical day. In certain places, the feast is marked by celebrations involving music, flowers, and processions. These cultural expressions, filled with simplicity and beauty, show how devotion to the saint goes beyond the theological and liturgical sphere, penetrating deeply into the people's sensibility. St. Agnes became a symbol of purity that enlightens, faith that transforms, and hope that sustains souls amid difficulties. The story of St. Agnes also left deep marks on the spirituality of many later saints. Some accounts show that young virgin saints such as St. Lucy, St. Cecilia, and St. Philomena were inspired by her example to remain faithful to Christ in the face of persecution. Other virgin saints, such as St. Rita and St. Clare, saw in Agnes an ancient and glorious model of total self-giving to God. In their spiritual writings, various saints mention the fortitude of the young martyr as a source of encouragement. This shows that her influence does not belong only to the distant past, but accompanies the history of the Church like a thread of light that never breaks, guiding the faithful on the path of holiness. Thus, over more than 1,700 years, St. Agnes has remained a living presence in the Church. Her witness transcends cultures, eras, and borders because it is born of a profound truth. Holiness is the fruit of love, and true love does not fear any sacrifice. Her unbreakable fidelity, her radiant purity, and her supernatural courage continue to inspire millions of Christians throughout the world. St. Agnes is eternal because her life is not grounded in earthly glories, but in union with Christ, who is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And as long as there are souls willing to love God sincerely, her story will continue to be a source of light and strength for all.